Thank you very much for the invitation to chair this panel. I would like to just start by introducing our wonderful colleagues. And I'm going to just go in the order in which they are seated. Seated next to me is Dr. J.P. Bosman. We have met this morning, so I'm not going to do any kind of complicated introductions. Next to JP is Dr. James Njenga. Next to James is Mr. Nkululeko Fuyani. I haven't met you yet. Hello. Nice to meet you in person. Next to Nkululeko is Prof. Alfred Msomi. Thank you, Prof, for joining us. Next to Prof is Ms. Lindsay Wesner. Lindsay, it's been lovely meeting you today. And then on the far side, Mr. Isak Saki, very nice to have you on the panel. All right. My task is just to very quickly sort of set the scene for us. Our agenda for this panel discussion is really around thinking about learning management systems. So Blackboard, Moodle, Sakai, and so on. And our goal is to allow each of our presenters, with the exception of our two colleagues in the middle, everybody comes from a different institution. So we're going to have slightly different institutional perspectives on what is happening here today. We're going to try and make up a little bit of time. So I'm going to just skip my next slide. But what I am going to do is I'm going to ask everybody in this audience to take a moment and think about yourself and the LMS at your institution. Okay? So just pause, recover from the cup of tea and James's wonderful and terrifying keynote, and take a second to think about what is your use of your institution's LMS like. So I'm at the University of Cape Town, and we have an LMS that we call Vula, which is a Sakai-based LMS. And I have 3 images that I suggest to lecturers. That is kind of most common for how people use LMSs. The one is the idea of the kind of personal assistant. It emails your students for you. It alerts them to certain things they should be doing. It reminds them of test dates and so on. The second one is like the filing cabinet. It's just the place where we dump all the things. The PDFs go in there, the videos go in there, perhaps the forum discussions go in there, but it's like a filing cabinet, really. And then the last image I suggest is kind of the idea of a gateway, that it's a doorway to a whole world of learning out there. And I'm going to ask you to think about, there's one that's not on there, my mother's car boot. My mother is a school teacher. Everything can be found in the boot of her car. From like extra snacks for the children, to paper, to report notes, to marking, it's all in there. So if you think about your use of the LMS, are you my mother's car boot, the filing cabinet, the personal assistant, or the gateway? And we're going to do this the old-fashioned way to save time. We're going to do it by show of hands. So if your use of the LMS is like my mother's car boot, everything's in there, but it's not very orderly, can I ask you to put your hand up? Okay, no one's going to admit to that. Yeah, maybe. How about sort of. I see some slightly like shy hands. How about the second one? It's like a filing cabinet. It's orderly, but it's, it's all just in there. Let's see, hands wave. Okay, yay, thank you. Thank you, lovely people who know me and wave enthusiastically. Second thing, is it like your personal assistant? It does your announcements, it does your emails, it keeps your calendar. Let's see those hands, where are they? A couple of them, thank you, wonderful. Is it like a gateway to the rest of the online world? Let's see those hands. Okay, if you haven't put your hand up yet, please put your hand up. Because there are a lot of hands in this room that didn't go up. So I'm interested in what metaphor would work for you. It may be that it's just unexplored territory, a place we haven't really been yet. And hopefully, with some conversation with our colleagues, we'll be able to move on from that. So I thought that I would frame today's discussion a little bit in terms of the choice that is in front of we here MUT today, which is that there are lots and lots of learning management systems out there. There's, among the big ones, there's Sakai, there's Moodle, there's Blackboard. Blackboard's really the biggest. Moodle's probably the second biggest. Canvas is growing in popularity and is kind of the newbie on the block, having only started in the 2000s. So there are a lot of choices open to us. And one of the things that we're going to try and do in today's conversation is reflect on what some of those choices are. But critically, the thing that an LMS needs to do is it needs to create a space for us to deliver content, a space to interact and communicate with our students, potentially a space for assessment, a space where we can learn more about our students, where we can find out from the analytics what our students are doing or not doing. And I would argue, critically, in the contemporary society, a good LMS should create a gateway as well to the rest of the digital world. The problem we sit with, though, is that as the number of features of our LMS increases, so does the complexity, which makes it harder to learn for ourselves as staff and for our students. And that is a massive challenge for us going forward. So I'm going to pause there. You're not going to hear my voice for a moment. And I'm going to pass on to our colleagues. I'm going to start with JP and ask him to talk a little bit about personal learning environments, PLEs, personal learning environments, and how those might relate to LMSs. And then we're going to move through, and each of our presenters today has a slightly different approach around the LMS issue.
Thank you, Shanali. Which one should I use? This one or this one? I need to be rooted. Is the sound on? Okay. I need to operate the computer as well. So good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning, yes. Wonderful to be here. And tomorrow I'll say more officially sounding words just to say my appreciation for the honor to be here today. I just want to start up my little presentation, and you're going to see I'm going to try and be brave. So if this works now, then I'm safe for tomorrow morning. If this doesn't work now, I have a huge problem. And so this is just a little thing I'm going to try out, because tomorrow in the keynote, I want us to be really interactive in terms of thinking together, all right? And I've devised a little plan, and it unfortunately, Shanali, doesn't just, it's not just show of hands. We need the technology to kind of work. So I think most of you are connected, right, to the internet in some way. I've prepared my presentation on that web address, which is zeetings.com/JP Bosman. So it's meetings, but with a Z. So if I can just ask you to, in your own browsers of your devices, go to that web address. I'll say a few introductory words while you are doing that, and we'll go to that site and we'll start the presentation. So the organizers, as well as our panel, have decided that it might be good to start off with just telling a little bit about our context, because it's so different. Like in the Czech Cape Higher Education Consortium universities, we are all four here, and all four have different systems or different types of applications of those systems. So here I go. I'm from Stellenbosch University, and I'm from the Center for Learning Technologies, and we kind of inspire the university to use our wonderful learning technology systems, of which the LMS is one. And you will hear the way I speak. I think we should maybe rather move towards this idea of the gateway, which talking about an ecosystem of different tools. We have Moodle. We've moved to Moodle about 7 years ago, and we have integrated into that the typical Turnitin. We have Adobe Connect for our kind of real-time webinar style. We've got TechSmith Relay for lecture recording. We've got Camtasia Studio for making videos. I'm mentioning some of the bigger tools that's institutionally supported, which is also quite important. So we are so-called research-intensive university, but in the last month, it was clearly established, also by our senior management, DVC Learning and Teaching. In so many words, he said, let's not kid ourselves. if we don't succeed in delivering the highest quality teaching and learning, then we cannot function also as a research institution. So I think for us, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow as well, this whole idea of teaching versus research, I think is kind of a fallacy thinking. And so therefore, that's sort of who we are. Right, let's see if my plan is going to work. So now I'm going here. And have you guys, oh no, you guys, I'm not seeing that. You've seen the little old TV screen, right? What's happening here, as if by magic. Is this appearing on your screen? Wonderful. So this Zeetings allows us to be interactive, and you're welcome to respond by clicking on yes or no, and then the submit button on any of your devices, and then we'll just see if this is working. Yeah, I got one. Fantastic. So the panel, everyone is welcome to respond. I'm not going to wait for everyone. There's about 110 people here, and I guess the Wi-Fi might also make it a little bit slow, etc. So let's give a few more seconds. No internet. Okay. So we'll talk about the connectivity later on. I hope that that might be sorted out. So only 12 responses. Oh, okay. 14, 10%, 15. Okay, we're not going to wait for 100%. All right. Stick with the substance of what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to just say so far 100% are following. Right, so the future of the LMS in higher education, one size fits all. That's a theme, and I want to take us back a little bit to 2009. So I did a bit of thinking and reading, and I realized, but this kind of talking, this kind of debate that we are having around the learning management system, or the VLE as it's called in Britain, is not new. And somehow there's the last decade or so, there's been this kind of this challenge, this discussion, this controversy between should do institutions of higher education actually need an LMS or not, the VLE? And believe it or not, this is almost 10 years old. And I found this almost famous blog post by Steve Wheeler, the well-known British educationalist, where he talks about this and he makes the controversy. And he takes it back to the two-fingered salute, which were the British and English bowmen who pulled their bows with two fingers. And then Henry V fought the connection lost. Yeah, so my whole thing is now also going to a standstill. So that's brilliant. So I'll just say my piece. So he basically said, he describes the Battle of Agincourt, where a handful of British and English soldiers defeated the French army of 30,000. And it was because they were so agile and the French were so heavily armored and had these long bows that could switch. And they basically, it was it changed the European history. And then he relates what he calls the VLE. He then compares to the French army, which is this big, well-prepared, slow-moving, kind of army that gets stuck in the mud. And then he compares that to the so-called personal web, or what one could also describe as the personal learning environment, as another option, which is more, he calls it edupunk type approach, which is more versatile, quick to change, etc., etc. And he sets up this dichotomy between the LMS and actually web tools, which everyone can use, which is free, etc., etc. And then that unleashed, a whole discussion of the one or the other, as it were. And then he says, basically, he predicted that literally in a year or two, the institutional VLE will be dead. That was said 10 years ago. So obviously that didn't happen, because today we are still alive and strong and well, and we're still discussing that. And then also I thought in 2011, I also did a presentation on this where I debated in a way with another colleague, Michael Rowe, who's very much into PLE, so Person Learning Environment. He's very much against you might know Michael James. He's very much not against the institutional LMS, but saying this institutional type system is not freeing us, and the way he teaches something else, another way makes more sense. And then I have had a basically a presentation onto PLE or not to PLE. That is not the question. The journey from the LMS and then back or something like that. And hopefully when the connection is on again, I will make the slides available, because both this blog post as well as that presentation of mine, I've linked on the slides, and you will be able to go and look at those things. So the point is, at that time, and that was 2011, which is about 8 years ago, that discussion was still going strong. So my point, just to open up the space a little bit, is that I'm not sure if the PLE, the personal web, has actually gone away. And I wonder, and maybe this is mixing in too much for this discussion, which is more purely on the LMS, we should also be thinking about, but what is even another approach towards talking with or working with learners, teaching and learning, etc. And so in a way, for myself, I make the sense that for a teacher like Michael, because his pedagogy is authentic, problem-based, he has the learners just freely designing groups, things that they then post on wikis and blogs, etc. For his approach, I would say that approach of not using the LMS is probably very powerful and the best way. At the same time, I then think of the many colleagues, the many lecturers who are sitting with 300, 400, 500 students who cannot see that it's possible, to assess 500 quizzes on different systems, or who's reliant on, let's say, anti-plagiarism or Turnitin type of systems to help them, with essay marking, or the communication that was talked about, etc., etc. And at the moment, and Saki and I have talked about it, we are not in the fourth industrial revolution, I think, in higher ed. We are not in the third industrial revolution. I'm pretty sure that we are still sitting in the second industrial revolution in terms of the way that we think about our institutions and the way that we teach. Even having this conference with us, the knowers, standing up front here, and you guys sitting in rows, and I'm trying to do something interactive with the technology. So the 2IR we are in is based on, I would say, constructive alignment, which is the big thing I think that that our whole system is based on. It's about outcomes, it's about assessment, it's about aligning those two and creating learning activities that connect the two. While we are still in that system as a higher education space, I think it must be very, very difficult to envision anything else than a kind of institutional system that helps us with herding that process and with doing all the things that we should do. Right, so that's my one take. The second one is, I just want to open up the possibility that maybe as institutions, we should still be asking not just LMS or not, but maybe LMS and what else? Because it might be that many of us have changed our way of teaching to be maybe more transformative, or to be work integrated, or to be social learning, or peer-based, or there are many words to describe these things, or problem-based learning, where the LMS just doesn't cut it, and you do need other kinds of instruments, other kinds of tools, or preparing students for lifelong learning with portfolios, maybe their own website, that kind of thing. We shouldn't just, cut that off as well. So the point that I want to make is that one should be open, but that the way that you want to teach, the pedagogy of what you want to do, that should be the deciding factor in actually the type of LMS or whatever one chooses. My last thoughts are that if one chooses a system, the first of all, it must be robust. So the other day at UNAM, we visited there, and the one lecturer said a very true thing. She said, on the LMS, you had a cutoff date. The student told her, you have a cutoff date for my assignment, but she has 7,000 students. So she's telling them, listen, guys, some of you must hand in on Monday, some of you must hand in on Tuesday and Wednesday to stagger it, because otherwise the system is going to crash. And then the student asking, but why do you then call it a cutoff date? So the point is, the system should then be robust enough to do what you're planning to do with it. I think it must be fully supported, whatever you choose. Support is critical. of the students and of the lecturers, so that must definitely be in place. And it must be mobile. I think that's my last little 2 cents. But like I said, we must possibly be open to a kind of an ecosystem where other things are allowed, but in an integrated way. Because the LMS is not just the LMS anymore. It has become much more than that, and we should be thinking about that. Thanks, Shanani.
Thank you, JP. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, JP. I think what I would like to do is to invite the input of one of our colleagues from MUT at this point, because I think we need to hear a little bit about the specific, about how the LMSs are functioning at MUT, and particularly what you're hoping to get out of this. So, Prof. Nsomi, Ms. Fuyani, yes? There we go, sir.
Colleagues, good morning. I'm not really going to focus on the LMSs at MUT, but for me, I'm going to focus on what I believe is important first before you can arrive at making a decision of choosing a particular LMS. Because by right, there are issues that one need to attend to before you can begin to identify an LMS. If you look at this presentation I have here, it's a framework on e-learning challenges and a solution, which in my view can play a vital role in terms of coming into decision of choosing a particular learning management system. The whole question or problem of the use of technology in teaching, for me, it starts off with the university strategy on e-learning. Because at this level, the university needs to begin to talk about issues of what is e-learning in a particular institution. This concept at MUT will definitely be different from the definition of the same concept in another university. So if we don't have an understanding of what we are trying to do with the e-learning as an institution, then we are bound to have a number of challenges. And these questions should be clearly articulated at the level of the university strategy on e-learning. Because from there, you will begin to look at the infrastructure, the systems, and the support services in a particular context. Because our context, of course, will not be the same. And you look at the institutional core ideology and leadership. Because when you look at those, the last one, the core ideology and leadership, for me, it's very important that we are clear at the top floor in terms of what do we want to achieve with the use of technology in teaching, and how do we get together, achieve what we intend to achieve with the concept of technology. Hence, the e-learning implementation processes will solely depend on the definition that we have arrived at as an institution. Hence, the issues of the attitude towards the use of any LMS that you will adopt with the lecturers and the students, it will be a key in this. And the lecturer behavioral intention to use and the student behavioral intention to use, as well as the actual use of the system by both lecturers and students, are very important for me, because they will then be able to assist a university in terms of knowing which out of many LMSs that are available we can choose as an institution. So I'm saying this, colleagues, because a systematic strategy is the one, in my view, that is very important. I know in most cases we talk of the management system basing it on the budget, to say that as a university we don't have enough budget, we can cycle for A, B, or C. But I don't think that's an issue for me. The issue is, how do you define e-learning as an institution? If you are clear and you know the meaning of the e-learning in your context, then the issue of the budget should not be a serious issue. and preparing professional technical staff. Because no matter how fancy LMS you have, but if these colleagues are not there, there's no way that you can have an effective LMS at the institution. Intensive training programs, the e-learning functionalities, to deal with the issues of confidence. These are the aspects that are very important. And the issue of the content development and the e-learning pedagogical theories, if we don't have a know-how of these issues, again, the LMS you will choose will not be able to assist you to achieve what you intend to achieve. Well, as MUT, we currently have two systems, the Blackboard and the Moodle. But we have been all along using the Blackboard. But the Faculty of Natural Sciences, because of some challenges we were experiencing with the Blackboard, and the challenges that we were experiencing due to a number of factors that we had, we felt that we need to explore other possible LMS and see how we can compare the two so that we can be in a position to determine as to which is the LMS we can consider. But again, in looking at that, we were not able to look at all the associated factors that can assist us in terms of the decision making. So, what I want to say in this summit, the issue of LMS for me is the last step we can begin to think of. But the first step is the strategy. What is the university strategy on e-learning? Is it enough to have an e-learning driven by one person in a university? Is it enough to have an e-learning when the top floor is not really clear about what you are trying to do? Is it enough to have an e-learning when staff members are not actually exposed on the challenges that one will experience when you want to move to the technology space in teaching and learning? Because if we don't do that to our colleagues, we will always find resistance. Resistance not because they don't want to do what you request them to do, but because we have never given them a platform to understand the new life of teaching they are going to be encountering on the way. So I guess my 5 minutes is over, but we are going to say more through the discussion session. So for now, I thought this is what I can present to open up your thinking, to say that we should not confine the discussion of today's meeting only on LMS, but we must be aware of associated factors that will play a vital role in terms of choosing a particular LMS. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Professor Msomi. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go and sit in the front over there so that I can wave time cards so that people can see them easily. James, can I ask you to take the floor and to add your particular perspective on LMS choices?
I hope you don't mind me sitting. Okay. So I'll start with a controversial question. And it is, do we really need LMSs? So, and if we need them, why do we need them? We started off with a discussion on how people use LMSs at UCT. But do they use them in those particular ways because they need them, or because they are mandated to use them, or because they feel it's their duty to do that or to use them? I ask this because reflecting from why I use them, it's mainly to share the content with the students, to put those deadlines, like you mentioned, in my assessments, especially when I'm having very big classes. But other than that, I still get to do my lectures, my normal engagement with students in the classroom. And probably 1 or 2 times when I have to do a group email, then the personal assistance in the LMS helps. But there's still the critical question: do I really need to use them? What would I do if they weren't there? So to respond to that, I think when we see or view LMSs, we see them or view them probably in 3 different contexts. There's the managerialist context of viewing them. And with the managerialist context, it's mainly we want to capture the student marks. We want to monitor what they're doing online. We want to see a way of reporting the type of assessments, the types of content that we're giving our students. And I'm not so sure how the managerialist view of those things actually translates to effective use of the technology, effective teaching and learning of those technologies. And of course, for some of us who want to go beyond the technology, beyond just using the technology for technology's sake, we want a way, like I said in my introduction on the definition of educational technology, a way of systematizing the content that we give to our students. Do we use the e-learning systems to systematize the content? Or is it a filing cabinet without any system of filing? And do we have those learning content put there as learning events? That is, we can have learning events embedded in our content that trigger the kind of learning or the kind of experiences that we want our students to have. And still on the pedagogical issue, it's what is the interface? How do we see the interface between us as teachers, the technology, and our students? I've seen some of ways e-learning is being used, or LMSs are being used as a way to tell students, if instead of asking questions to their facilitators or their lecturers, check the LMS. Is that what is the intended use pedagogically of those? And sometimes, not often, I use it for enhancing social learning. Whereas I tell students, discuss certain aspects online, collaborate on, say, reviewing an article, comment on an article, and see how you learn through collaboration. But is that what is intended? And then probably now going to reverse that, the initial question I asked, can I achieve that or what I've just stated without using an LMS? Probably yes. Probably I should say affirmatively, yes, I could. But I still find myself using the LMS. One, I think it's for the managerialist and administrative issues that I've mentioned. But I think further than that is a way to make sure that my work is made easier for the future. And therefore, next time I'm teaching a similar course, or I'm teaching, at least I have some events that I can copy from whichever course I did, and all I need is to populate the content. And that makes it easier from the management perspective of the courses I'm teaching. However, technology being technology, there are some limitations. And I think some of the limitations that we need to be aware of is, for example, the ease of use, intuitiveness, enchantment of the technology, the issues to do with integration with other systems, especially when we start looking at very specialized systems. And I'll stop at that, but those are the 3 specific issues that we really need to address.
Thank you very much, James. What I'm going to do, I think, is James was sort of talking towards the end about social learning. And so, Lindsay, is it okay if I invite you up? Lindsay's going to chat to us a little bit about Google Classrooms as a possible LMS space. And I think that might be a space to think a little bit about social learning.
Morning, everyone. So just to give some context, because I feel like in these spaces I need to justify the fact that I'm a pseudo-academic, as I like to call myself. My background is in classroom teaching, in fact. Let me just get my slides in the right place. My background is in classroom teaching, and listening to Prof. Msomi's model earlier around developing strategies based on vision, what's the vision for e-learning, what is it that we're trying to achieve. I feel like perhaps in that model, what we could be looking at is a loop back from the use of students and learners and their use of e-learning, their use of technologies to inform the strategy. So in my classroom, when I was a classroom teacher, I'm now an education consultant and I work all the way through from primary up to higher education. In my classroom, I used Google Classroom as, for the most part, a learning management system. We did have another system running parallel to that in the school context, because Google Classroom does not claim to be a complete LMS. But in the description earlier of LMSs being a potential gateway, what I wanted to just share with you is some of the possibilities within Google Classroom as a student-centered learning environment. So globally, there are 40 million students using Google Classroom. I just sent a message asking for the statistics in South Africa, but I do know that I have worked with over 100 schools in South Africa who are currently using G Suite of Education. What I find is that actually, if we're starting with the students who will be coming into our institutions in a number of years, it's potentially a good idea to explore a platform, or at least the type of learning that happens in that platform to inform that decision. For me, before I show you a little bit about Google Classroom, when I was in a technology integration coach role with my own teachers, we explored Moodle and Blackboard as options. We ran trial periods and pilots, and my biggest battle with both of those platforms in my context, bearing in mind it was school, was adoption. When I introduced Google Classroom, I had 80% of my teachers on board, and within one term, 100% of the teachers in the school were using Google Classroom. So I think that the issue raised about usability and interactivity and ease of use and accessibility is a really important consideration that we need to think about. And then we need to think about the learning culture. What is the culture of learning that we're trying to create, and what are the tools that are going to help us to achieve that? So for those of you who haven't seen inside a Google Classroom before, this is a screenshot of a student's homepage. Immediately you will note the color, the visuals, the different classes where they are enrolled. Then you have a number of sections in Classroom. So this is a screenshot of the stream, which very much works almost like a social media feed. Again, an interface that young people today are familiar with. And what you'll see here, these are actual screenshots of this use of this course with English education students. that students are actually sharing not just comments, but resources and creations with their peers. That students are able to share videos, digital products that they've created using various different forms, and that others are able to engage with peer feedback and discussion in a public space. So it's not my work goes to the lecturer. There is very much a communal collaborative aspect to that learning. In the classwork section, you have traditionally all of the things that I know you would have in Moodle and Blackboard under your classwork, giving quizzes, discussion starters, assignments, etc. Those are able to be organized as topics within Google Classroom. And then you have self-marking quizzes, even with math type and math script. So there are add-ons and plugins that you can link into Google. By the way, they are all free of charge. G Suite for Education is a free package for education. They make their money from the business, G Suite for Business arm. So you have self-marking quizzes built in that are integrated with Classroom. And recently, Classroom has also updated so that it has an integrated grade book within the platform itself. So what you're seeing here is some digital submissions. Again, the students are creating digital products and uploading that in to the teacher for assessment and to give comment. And what you're seeing there is a screenshot of the Google Classroom grade book, where as teachers are working, marking, assessing in Google Classroom, it's automatically populating those into a Google spreadsheet, which of course can be imported directly into Blackboard or Moodle. So I know that a number of the features are replicated and duplicated in many LMSs. The one thing that I'd like you to consider is the feedback, the ability for students to edit work, or for teachers or lecturers to edit student work live and to give comments and input. And I think that the question that you may like to consider is, can Google Classroom be friends with another LMS? Can students be creating work on mobile? I know JP mentioned mobile as a consideration. Can students be creating work on mobile? Can they have their work organized in a cloud accessible from any device if they're moving between labs, a classroom, and home, for instance? Does that LMS allow for true collaboration? And by collaboration, I don't just mean you submit your separate slides and we whack them together as one presentation, but are we actually able to do that? And if we link back to the vision, the World Economic Forum has identified these 10 skills, James alluded to them this morning in his keynote, that we want to be preparing our students for. So my question is, whatever LMS or learning design it is that you're using, is it actually empowering students with the development of these skills? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I think what we would like to do at this point is I'm going to hand back to another colleague from MUT, Mr. Nkuleko Fuyani, to ask where he would like to comment on the issues of LMSs, either institutionally or in terms of actual.
All right, thank you very much, Program Director, and good morning to colleagues and our visitors. My talk, I think, more or less like Prof. Somis is on the choice of LMS, something that has become a conundrum for many institutions of higher education. And I'll try to take you back. I will borrow from what Dr. James presented in the morning. So if you look at the higher education sector, particularly in South Africa, maybe even globally, they are operating in a space where funding is reducing dramatically. And they still have got so many needs that they still have to cater with little resources that they have. So in any space like that, when you have to make a choice, it becomes a contested terrain. So choosing an LMS, in most cases, is reduced, in most cases, to issue of funds. And that's where we end up going for technology for the sake of technology, which is also called the shiny tech syndrome, trying to cover ourselves from this space that we are in, where we've got less resources, but with more demands. So what I will do, I'll draw us back to where, to the timelines when in South Africa most institutions adopted LMS as a system of teaching and learning. And Ngambi and et al. And friends, that was 2016 article, they give us a categorized analysis, and they put it in 4 phases of adopting technology. And the first one, they say it was when in 1996 to 2000, and it shows that institutions of higher education concentrated on using technology as computer-assisted instruction. Then the one that I'm going to concentrate on, or where I'll move from, is the phase 2, 2001 to 2005, and they called it democratization of knowledge and development of strategies. And the third one, 2006 to 2010, it was scholarship and professional development. Then the last one, 2011 to 2016, they call it digital literacies, flexible learning, social media, and professional development. Maybe the 5th one we can add now that we are facing is the 4th industrial revolution. So within the phase 2 that I said I will start my discussion on, you will see that the emphasis of using technology then was on the acquisition of ICT infrastructure in general. And this is where we see most of the South African universities adopting LMS. And instead of concentrating on how to use them effectively, to them access was more important. And most universities just adopted en masse these learning management systems. And again, that was a template style of importing whatever technology is out there into our learning spaces. And perhaps if we were to check, this is where our problems with LMS come from. Because when we adopted LMS, we did not understand what we were doing, and it has taken us time. Most of us are still emerging in those spaces, trying to figure out what exactly do we need, or do we really need the LMSs? And Dr. James also asked the question to say, for most things that we do on LMS, it is clear that we can still do them without LMS. So again, it takes us back to the shiny tech syndrome. And there are various studies showing on the implementation and usage of LMS, and they all have indicated low usage. And Lindsay also confirmed that with your Google, with your Blackboard and Moodle, in most spaces, there are very few, unless until you force people to use them. And if the moment you force them, they will use them as a tick box, not effectively. Then, and the reasons that we have seen for low capacity utilization and usage of these LMSs include poor infrastructure. Again, it takes us back to funding. Because there is this technology called learning management systems, and sometimes we get some grants here and there, we acquire it for the sake of just acquiring it. Now, this technology cannot work in a vacuum. It must be in an ecosystem with other technologies and even offline systems. And this is where we've got a problem that we normally causes the low capacity utilization. And the other thing, when these technologies are acquired, is either there is no consultation or poor consultation with the end users. And this is where we start seeing people perhaps sort of rejecting or not using them as they are supposed to. And the other thing is feasibility studies. Like we have said that if you do a feasibility study, you will understand if you really need it or if you can manage to use it. And then the other thing is we have got more of our, particularly I will say academics, who have got low or poor literacy and efficacy in computers. And some of our students, particularly those that are coming from disadvantaged background, they see the computer the first time they come to the university. So an expectation that they are the 21st century babies and they are good with technology sometimes might be a myth. And the other one is, in most cases, most of us here are employed as lecturers on the basis of our expertise in certain subjects. We don't really understand the pedagogical aspect. What more to mention pedagogy is now in a new terrain that is technology. Then that said, The solution that I will proffer is perhaps more or less the same with Prof. Msomi, is we need to go back to the mission and vision of the institution, which then informs the teaching and learning strategy of the institution. Then the teaching and learning strategy institution will inform the e-learning strategy. Then only when we have got those aligned and in place, we can now decide on the technological affordances, because we now know what we want to achieve. And then in conclusion, I will say it is almost dangerous to reduce the debate on LMS choice to a binary reasoning, whereby in most cases, because Moodle and Blackboard are the leading LMS, so we always try to do a comparative analysis. But it's not about which is better than the other or which features does it have. The answer should be, does it serve our objectives? So once we do that, then we are well aware that it's helping us to achieve our strategic objectives at the institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuyani. I'm going to hand over to our last panelist for this morning, Mr. Isak Smith.
Thank you, and thanks, colleagues, for the opportunity to also share some ideas with you. I'm also from a University of Technology, and we've shared a lot of development talks over the years from an SATN perspective and otherwise. We're an institution with 34,000 users, students, so it means that, you know, we do need, when we look at technology, it needs to work. We're way past those days where we learn about things that doesn't work. So what's in it for me? It's always been my philosophy for the past 20 years. And yes, I've been in educational technology at a university from 99. So we've gone through all the phases that you explained. Thanks for that. We've burnt our fingers. We've made our mistakes. We also learned from that. And we moved. And we changed. And we adapted. Okay, so nowadays it's not whether you go to a service provider and ask them for a quote, and based on that you take it to management and they sign off. No, we need to take it to a tender committee where we do have academics as part of the end users. Part of the tender evaluation committee really evaluates that. And that's what we've done. We do it every 3 to 5 years. First of all, we're all unique as universities, and we're special because of that, but we are different. Remember that. Embrace your culture. Work towards your own strategies. What do you want to achieve? We've also learned that from the panel. What do you as an institution see as your specific strategy? Where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? Unfortunately, integrated e-learning requires 3 components within your institution. Management. If you leave it to them, they will normally buy the cheapest because they look at the budget, they look at that massive sort of item line, and they put a line through it because then they save a few bucks. It relies on IT. If IT would to acquire an LMS, it will be geeky, and they will have full control. Whether they can manage that or not, I don't know. And if it's pedagogy only, it will be something that sits on a rack, use it or lose it or whatever, don't really matter. But okay, so why for us? We did go on an open tender, so we're not worried about that. We opened that to the world to come and present all these solutions, because we were not looking at an LMS. We were looking at an integrated learner management system. Learning must be there, but it must also allow for management of learning. So yes, that's there, and it must allow for integration to your back-end student information system, and using building blocks that ties into, brings the other stuff in, so that you've got this basket of all the other tools, such as the social media, Twitter, Facebook, all these others. Can it be integrated? Can you have, I'm an engineer, I'd like to see a single entry to that. Otherwise, if I allow 6 LMSs in my institution for the students who have got 6 subjects per semester a year, they will have to learn 6 different systems. Is it fair to them? Okay, and we know that our lecturers are not computer literate. It's even a bigger problem for that. Then also, we did start off with strategy and a plan. Then we looked at the software. Then you look at the hardware. Then you look at the support. And to be quite honest, in higher education, IT support has not been good. we don't sell our services, we only provide for the institution. So they normally work 8 to 5, 4 or 5 days a week. We nowadays in the new fourth industrial revolution where we are, I believe we are there, although we still teach according to industry 2, with this Victorian style of putting people in rows, put someone in front and tell the other people, shut up, I'm talking. So yes, we need to move with the times. But then also, nothing is free, not open source, not proprietary, whatever, but you're looking for a solution. Is that solution cost effective to the institution in terms of your strategic reality? What do you want to achieve? Okay. Now, if you just look at South African higher institutions, the past year, 8 universities in South Africa, Southern Africa, SADC, went to software as a service where they are hosted, where they are looking at hosted solutions. They don't want to be bothered with the nuts and bolts of hosting, managing, trying to do that in-house, because we learned that doesn't work. We've got a system that's available 24/7, 365, and really 365. And nowadays, all the updates and upgrades are happening automatically in the back with failover and disaster recovery and. Our IT needs to supply a connectivity to the service. That means the server is not down, my access to the service is down. So that's the only thing that they still need to do, and they're not really managing that all the time, because now it's proxies of firewalls and all the other stuff. Okay, where did we get into? We had a Vision 2020, which basically was around adoption and use, pedagogically correct use of an LMS and all the other tools. We are now moving into Vision 2030 Smart University, where we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution, and we're talking about cloud systems. That's what 4IR is all about, computers talking to computers. And that means our unit, as a support to the academic project in terms of educational technology, we get involved in the curriculum development process, where we design curriculum for blended learning. We assist academics in the development and use and learning design to make sure that they've got blended learning. Not blended learning because of classroom and technology use, but also blending technologies. Why do we use a system that allows us that? We want a system that allows us analytics. We are there, we use it. James, it's not that it's there. We use big data to see how students learn, so that we can now look at students, we can identify students at risk. Why? Because we care. So technology is an enabler, but it needs to support. Is it used by all? No. But I think we do have a 86% plus adoption, which I call 100%. 14% you need to retire. They will not adopt that in any case. That's normal. But we are now moving into students. They are our core business. So with that, let's move to learner-centric, away from teacher-centric. So I'd like to leave you with one idea. We're talking about a sort of decolonization of the curriculum. We should need to look at something like a decolonization of learning. We still have this old colonial system of putting people in rows. Learning is a 24/7, 365 activity that happens in the time of the individual, not in my time, not in your time, not in the time that we make available in 7 minutes. Sorry. We need to allow more than that. Thank you.
Folks, I think the thing that I'm looking forward to most today is that 2.5 hours at the end of the day, where hopefully you can start catching these people and asking some more questions during the cocktail networking event. I just want to highlight a couple of things that have come out from today's conversation. One of the things that I'm hearing very strongly is before we make decisions about LMSs, we need to consider our institution strategies. The next thing that I heard very clearly is making choices about LMSs are contingent on multiple relationships and multiple connections within our institutions and our educational communities. So is management, IT, and teaching staff all on board? Have we considered our student populations, our student groups adequately? I've heard people talk about, for example, I think James asked the question around managerialism and higher education and LMSs, and whether or not our LMSs are being used for teaching spaces or for managerial, largely managerial spaces. And then both Lindsay and JP offered us almost some alternatives in some ways to the kind of institutional level LMS. Lindsay's was the suggestion of kind of a Google Classrooms environment that is much more under the control of the individual educator, that functions a little bit differently from a conventional LMS. And JP was talking about personal learning environments. So our own choices within a kind of larger online digital world. I'm going to pause there and offer to our panel an opportunity to just briefly comment on anything that you've heard today so far. So I've got two.
I'm going to
gonna
do
cut
something
us off?
unorthodox. I'll use this one. I just want to interrupt you. Yes, I realize that we are pressed for time, but I've taken an executive decision. And the decision is the session that was coming immediately after the panel discussion will be moved to tomorrow morning. We have space for that. We'll accommodate it. I would like to give this panel session more time so that when we finish here, we'll go straight to lunch. Our lunch was scheduled to be at 1:30, but when we finish, we will go for lunch, because I realized there were many issues that were raised here, and if we were going to go to another workshop session, we will not do justice to it. And I really feel this is going to be intense, and I just need that space to engage the panel with the audience. Yes, so our lunch is at 1:30, but if we finish just before that, it's okay, but we have enough time to run this session. Thanks.
Slow down a little bit. I'm going to hand the mic over to Prof. Msomi.
Okay, thank you, Program Director. Colleagues, I want to also mention the following. In the discussion we are having, I think it becomes clear to all the institutions that the students that we enroll are not all have experience or exposure on technology, which is the assumption we always make, to say that students, know technology, I can just throw them onto the technology platform and work on it. So this simply says, colleagues, we need to begin to develop a strategy for identifying students who need technology training and develop technology training programs for them before assuming that they will understand technology. And these kind of initiatives may increase the retention and persistence, particularly for online courses. Because what happens is the students that are really not familiar with the technology, they tend to hate the platform, and they don't want to work on the platform. And again, one last point I want to make is that through our communities of practice, by the way, I'm a mathematician by training. In our community of practice, we now discussing the possibilities of sharing the technology or the e-learning initiatives and partner with other institutions. But when one looks at that being done by individual departments, it will make a lot of sense if this can be coordinated in the institutions, whereby, for instance, Dr. Makua your unit could begin to engage with other universities. For instance, the sister universities here in KZN, we sit down and we look at the partnership in terms of sharing the online space, the online materials that we have as various institutions. Why do you have to reinvent the wheel when there is so much that other advanced universities have done in the space where we can easily share with others? Because the question of hosting LMS will always be difficult in all other universities. The issues of funds, budget that we spoke about, they will come into play. But there are universities that are advanced. Let's tap on the resources. Thank you.
What I think I'm going to suggest we do is that we pause with Prof. Msomi's questions for a few minutes. Seeing as we've now been given the luxury of a little bit more time, I would like to take questions from our panel, offer them to the floor, hear some comment from you, and then once we've spent some time with an issue, then we can move on to the next issue in the panel. Is that all right with everybody? Okay? All right, fantastic. So Prof. Msomi raised two issues for us that I heard. The first one is to consider the digital literacy of our students and their capacity to actually learn in a digital environment. The second issue that I heard was whether or not there was institutionally between higher education institutions sufficient collaboration on two fronts. One at the level of technology, at the level of the LMS, and two at the level of content. Are we sharing materials openly enough? Prof, am I summarizing correctly? Okay, thank you. So can we open that up to the floor? I think there is a roving mic somewhere in the room. Thank you very much, sir. And there is a hand right in front.
Thanks, Chair. I think what we're dealing with here is why do we feel we need LMSs? It serves as a one-stop shop for students and for the lecturer, because like my colleagues were saying there, that some of our students come to the university not familiar with technology. So if you're going to use a Blackboard, then next time you're referring them to Google Drive, and then, so with an LMS, you just have one-stop shop for them to log on, and then they access the material, or they can interact with the material. Secondly, I heard some of my colleagues talking about the issue of funds. Why do you need to pay, whereas some of these learning management systems are available for free? Why do you need to pay? And then lastly, some of my colleagues, I wish I could agree with them when they were saying our students are not familiar with technology. It depends on what one means by technology, because all of them come to university with their cell phones and they know the terminology used in technology, like username and password. They know how to create that and what it is. What we can say is they had never had a chance to use their cell phones for learning, to submit an assignment and all of that. And I agree with what Fian was saying, that many of them had never come closer to a computer, except at a till point in a supermarket. So touching a computer for them is something new, but that does not mean they cannot use technology, for they have cell phones. So what we can do is, let's meet them halfway, not to take them to laptops, for they are not able to interact with laptops or computers, but they have cell phones. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to stay a little bit with our issues around students and student digital literacy. Isak?
Yeah, I think I'd like to latch on, first of all, why not go for something free? Nothing in life is free. We all sit here, we all get a salary paid by someone, so someone needs to earn money somewhere. Also, at the same time, we train people as IT specialists, send them out into the world and say, go and make money. But whatever you design and develop, we would like to have it for free, please. So that, unfortunately, is a bit of a fallacy. It may be free for use, but then at the end, you need to pay for the hardware and the systems and all the other integration. You need to have your own IT technicians who support that. And remember, they work 5 days per week, not 7 by 365. And. So if you really, from my perspective in engineering, you need to look at the total cost of the company. And we've done that calculation many, many times. Whether you use an open source software for free, or whether you go to something like a software as a service or a hosted solution. Amazon Web Services is now offering space, the Googles, the Microsofts, all the others are making space available at a very low rate because they share that high infrastructure cost at the back. So I don't think that we need to always look at the cost. It's what's in it for me. What do I really pay, and what is the value it adds? Okay, that's one thing. I also want to say in terms of students not always being so up to date, they are. I think we should give our students a lot more credit. They come into institution with their Nike shoes and their iPhones. I could never afford an iPhone myself, even at my salary. And to be quite honest, so they're not always that. I think our biggest problem is with us, the older generation who's been here BC, before computers. Okay, and we got into that and we got scared because of this thing. Remember that I think that 90% of us sitting here grew up in a scenario where you've got a teacher in front of the class, no technology, and now we moved into that space and we all look at each other and we say, I got a doctorate or whatever, I'm not that bad. And now we want to change into technology. So yes, it's more a problem for us to develop into technology than for the younger generation. They get into it well, so let's give them some credit.
JP's had a hand up for a while, but what I'm going to try very hard to do is bounce between these people and these people. We're hearing different things come out. So costs and where they live. Which costs are visible to us, which ones aren't. The digital literacy of our students and the digital literacies of our educators, and our ability to apply those digital literacies to a teaching and learning environment as opposed to a social media environment. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to comment on any of that before I pass back to our panel? Is there a hand all the way at the back there? Yes, thank you.
I have a question. Speakers have been saying that the LMS should be student-centered. I have conducted a study at MUT on the use of LMS, the behavioral intention of students to use LMS at MUT. And the results show that if the lecturer encourages the students to use LMS, they will use it. And it had the highest effect compared to the other factors that I was looking at, which was the ease of use and the performance expectancy to use LMS. The influence of lecturers has the highest impact on the behavioral intention to use LMS by students. My question, I have got two questions. The first question is, how do you encourage lecturers to use LMS in their classroom? Number two is, how do you deal with the downtime in the classroom? Say you have your lesson plan, you have prepared it, you go to class, and 5 minutes in class having told the student that you click there and there, you use this link for today's lesson, within a minute, you don't have a network. How do you deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you very much to our colleague at the back. I didn't catch your name.
Sorry, my name is Zola Sibaya from the Department of ICT.
Thank you very much, Zola. You have two very coherent questions there. Is there anyone up front who'd like to address them? You're waving a hand.
Thanks. I want to address all the things. I think Zola's question connects with what Saki has said, and also what's been shown, that if the teacher is excited and passionate, this is actually true maybe of teaching in general, right? If somebody's just really passionate, I mean, you can have the worst slides, you can stutter almost, but if you believe and you've got this powerful knowledge you want to share, then usually auditors like that, they pick up the energy. So I think it's a similar thing. So what I'm trying to say is that for us, the focus on the curriculum and the transformation of programs and modules into more transformative or different kinds of learning that you want to enable, that to me is the magic bullet at this stage. If you just want to replicate your current way of teaching, paper behind glass, then you're going to ask that question, but now what do I do in class time? But if you, for example, you all know the concept of flipped classroom by now. It's become almost like a mantra, flipped classroom. But take it seriously. So that click on the link to see maybe the podcast or the interactive thing that's well designed, that's really engaging, that the student have to respond to, do it before class. Use the class time for the actual human interaction, conversation, which leads to deep learning. And that's more transformative. So one can go on with many different aspects. So we found at Stellenbosch University, if we point lecturers to the curriculum, let's change this curriculum to be better, to be more powerful knowledge building for our students, to be more successful, etc., to serve society better, then most of the pieces fall into place. On the student training, which I think is a very valid point, I think it's true students are quite savvy, but I think they do need a bit of nudging as to what it means by higher education studies. The stuff we do is very esoteric. It's not normal stuff. Maths and philosophy, it's not normal kind of knowledge. So you need to enact people to understand what these tech that you can now use, what does it mean for your discipline. So what I want to say is that at Stellenbosch we are going a little bit more faculty, discipline specific. So we've got for science students, we've got kind of a broad introduction, not only to technology. So it's about digital fluency, but it's also about other stuff around how do I learn science? What does learning science mean? And then technology skills are slotted in. Same with art, same with technology, same with medical science. And I think that the more pointedness, so we're not having a shotgun approach to enabling students. And lastly, even the online students, we've learned also in the hard way is that you have to orientate them to spend at least the first week of lots of support, lots of click-through videos, lots of how to use what you've conjured up here for them. That is so wonderful, but help them to understand how to use it, that it could be wonderful for them as well. Just some thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that takes a step towards answering some parts of your question. Lindsay.
Hi again, everyone. So on your question of how do you get teachers to actually, or lecturers to use an LMS, I think that's definitely a question worth considering. And if there are those of you in the audience who have tried and tested strategies on how to do that, I feel like this would be a valuable place to share. What I did want to share with you, I'm not sure how many of you have seen this Noster's model on managing complex change, but I feel like what we're actually talking about when we're talking about adoption of technology by lecturers and students is on a much broader scale, the issue of change management. And if you look down the right-hand side, I'm sure that we can all identify with having had false starts in our institution, with having frustration both from lecturer and student side, with experiencing resistance to the adoption of various different LMSs, platforms, pedagogies, strategies, also the emotional component of anxiety and confusion. And I find this model really helpful in a diagnostic sense, to look at what it is that you're seeing on the ground, and then to work backwards and identify what is the missing piece. So for instance, if you are experiencing confusion, or rather if your lecturers are displaying anxiety around the use of any particular LMS, then the question is, well, do they have the skills to use that LMS? And can you work on a champion system within a faculty? Is there somebody that's displaying adoption within that faculty in a positive and meaningful and deliberate way? And can you create and foster the spaces for that upskilling to happen within a collegial circle, really? So we could talk all day about this model, but I guess what I was hoping to actually do is to use it as some kind of provocation for potentially opening it up to you to share strategies strategies around what has worked to fill those gaps in your institution, if that's valuable to the floor.
So is there anyone sitting out there with strategies that they would really like to share?
I think maybe just back on the answer of using technology in the classroom, in a sense we overteach by 30% already. So I wouldn't always like to think that we need to bring the technology into the classroom, but that the technology use should augment learning. Use your time wisely in the classroom in terms of teaching, but get rid of that 30%. Move that online, into systems, whether that is collaboration, peer work, or anything like that. But then also at the same time, I agree with you. I would be very unhappy if I go to any sort of classroom and the technology doesn't work. And ESCOM plays a good role in sometimes making it not work. So that's another challenge. It's a very low-key thing, but if you haven't got electricity, then even your switches won't work. Your current cell phone towers are down. So even with mobile wide technology, it's not available. So, but let's think sometimes that technology is for a university that is primarily a residential institution. Spend your time wisely in the class, but use technology to augment, to support, to add on to that, where students can do it in their own time, and then make sure that you've got a quality system. It needs to work all the time. I pick it up, the more our systems haven't been down, I'm talking about the LMS, has not been down for the past 3 years, not a single day, except when we did major upgrades, and that happened in public holidays from 12 o'clock at night until 4 o'clock in the morning on the 25th, the 16th, and the 31st of December. I don't think that a lot of people are working on those days. But because of that, academics have now got into, and even students are now getting into that space where they say, it should be working all the time. So even a 10% downtime is becoming disastrous. So where some people can still go with weeks without a system, I don't know.
There were 2 hands here, Leko and then James, I think.
Yeah, I think I will take back the argument to the issue of strategic alignment. Because I find, like I said, we reduce this approach or adoption of technology into arguing about the features of technology. That is what we call shiny tech syndrome. Because there are many ways of killing that cat. And if we can try to unpack it, everyone will have his or her own strategy. But what is important is to say, what is the mission and vision of the organization? And in that mission and vision, there is that element that we call culture. And all organizations that are in the 21st century, they must have what we call e-culture. Because without the e-culture, this other resistance even by students, like I agree that students, they are more savvy, but sometimes they don't even understand why they have to use it. Why is that so? It's because they have not enculturated into using technology. So they don't see technology as something that should be part and parcel of their learning. Even academics, we have got academics that are very efficient and they are literate in ICT. But because they don't understand why they have to use it if they can use the other ways. So the cultural part, if we have that e-culture, and it starts with more small things. We start saying in this university, it's a green university, we're not printing everything. So if we move from there, and students start understanding that in this university, we have to use technology. And we have to link it with the 21st century life. To say you are in the 21st century, and we're approaching the Industrial Revolution. This is what you have to be a citizen in this kind of space. So from there on, as a lecturer, I will go to class and understand that in as much as I can do the offline activities, but I am robbing this very same student who will then operate in a digital. So by bringing in the technology, I already understand that one of the cultural aspects is make them digitally, I would say, aspirants. Then from there on, some of the things that will fall, those blocks will fall into places as we go along.
I want to suggest one radical thing. If you want lecturers to use technology, create a crisis. You just create a crisis. And so, so uh, let's, on reflection, what happened to us at UWC during the Fees Must Fall riots, or whatever they were. So we all took the stance with the students that higher education is expensive, but we did not stop teaching, although the university was closed. So what was there for us to continue teaching? So I think in creating a crisis, it could be also, now that I've said that, it could be, have we learned, as those of us who advocate for the use of technology, to take advantage of the crisis that manifests themselves in situations like the Fees Must Fall? What did we do? Did we encourage ourselves and our students to continue learning and using the technology? Because if we did, then the uptake increased. I can say with certainty that during that time, the adoption by the lecturers at UWC of the use of LMS went to above 90%. And even with the normalcy now, I don't think it's gone down. So I think there could be a way in which crisis and taking advantage of the crisis would force most of us in this room to use technology.
Okay, there is a hand at the back there, there's a hand in the front here, there's a hand there. So we're going to go Ebo at the back, then Prof in the front, and then hand at the back.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is George. I just want to pose a question based on everything that has been said so far. With internet infrastructure being considered a key thing as far as the learning management system is concerned and its use in the different universities. My question is, we've come across alternative platforms in which even settings have been made possible in which even when there is not internet, provisions have been made for such systems to be used. How possible, and I'm posing this to those who are more specialists in this area, how possible it is for some of these platforms to be redesigned in such a way that it's still accessible and usable when internet is not available, if if things like that can be done with platforms like Netflix and the rest. I'm sure it's something which is possible to do with learning management systems as well. But if that be the case, how possible it is and how can we go about it? Thank you.
Okay, I think what I'm going to do is we had 3 questions. So I think I'm going to take those 3 questions and then come to the audience, come back to our panel with 1 question at a time.
Well, mine is not really a question. It's just a response to the idea of creating a crisis. And I was just thinking, I think it's true. Sometimes to change human behavior, you do need a crisis. But I'm just also thinking that HDIs in this country, we do have an annual crisis at the beginning of each year, which is about NSFAS. Because when we open we start the academic year, we haven't received enough funding from NSFAS, and you know what students will say. We want our money in our accounts, otherwise we don't go to class. So maybe that is the kind of crisis that we should use to our advantage, so that even if they strike for 3 weeks, when they come back, you know that you're expecting them to have covered some work. To say there were all these resources available, I expect you to have done your work. So that is maybe even for the TLDC, it's the kind of crisis that we should probably maybe welcome and not see as a negative. Now, just as a general observation, there's been this suggestion that these new technologies, the fourth industrial revolution, may make certain careers redundant. And the question is, will the teacher become redundant? My own view is not likely. However, the teacher's omnipresence will be diminished. In other words, for students to learn, they will not need your presence 100%, the way it used to be. And that's what you need to welcome, that use the technology to stand in for you when you are not available. But there is no way that a machine can take over the role of a teacher completely. That is the one thing. Then my second observation is that as we welcome these new technologies, we also have to be careful. I think, Dr. Ndenga, you said it earlier, that as we adopt these new technologies, we don't necessarily get more free time. I don't know how many of you have heard about the myth of Sisyphus from Greek mythology. Sisyphus was a king who was punished by the gods, and the punishment was for him to roll a boulder, a rock, up a hill. And he was told, if you can take this boulder up to the hill, your punishment will come to the end. So every morning he would push this boulder up to the hill. And as he thought he was coming to the end of his punishment, he would lose his grip of the boulder, and the boulder would roll down. And so the following day, he would then again take the rock up the hill. And as he nears the summit, he loses his grip. The rock rolls down. Now, that myth, it's about, also applies to technology. So that's where the caution has to be. That as we become enthusiastic about technology, we should not assume that it is going to solve all our problems. The human element, the creativity, it's always going to be very, very vital. Because there is no way a machine, you talked about the possibility of machines even taking over our cognitive functions. But they are there to represent our cognitive functions. I don't think they can completely take over the role of a human being.
Thank you very much. And then I believe we had a hand at the back. So let's take that last question, and then we come back to our panel for some responses.
Thank you very much. Comments and input, probably starting from the point of adoption of an LMS. If the adoption is from the management top down, from management downwards, it becomes a problem in terms of the buy-in. Because one, the cost would be the only thing that would measure whether the decision made by the management, whether that is a suitable LMS or not. Then secondly, if we plan these three, as Paul was mentioned by one of the panelists, or in terms of the pedagogy, the learners, the IT, as well as management, then the buy-in, even if as lecturers would feel as part of the decision that was made to become, to adopt that LMS. Two, in terms of maybe another part, we need to look at the success, the benefits of that LMS would bring. If we look at that, one of the things that is mentioned, easy to use, it becomes number one. If it's easy to use, just like a cell phone. In terms of the students, yes, we agree. Our students, they come into our institutions from poor backgrounds, most of them. But they become digital natives in less than 2 months, more than this generation that most of us are in. So they adapt quicker. Now it's in choosing which LMS is easy to use, which should give us a direction, as opposed to which one is cheaper. Then thirdly, there are other things that probably the other colleague might have mentioned. In terms, again, which goes with everything that we would probably decide upon, the infrastructure, the type of hardware. But with all of those, we have to include contingency plans. What if this fails? Example, that being of ESCOM. Do we have generators in place? If we don't, then we need to put such in place. If we draw up a lesson plan, at the end of the lesson plan, we need to have a contingency plan. What if this fails? What if my laptop fails? What is an alternative? So all those should become part of the plan. Lastly, on some of what Prof. Msomi touched upon, this sharing of ideas with other institutions. Part of the introduction of technology is that it makes it easier for us and for our students to collaborate with other institutions, with other peers, anywhere in the world, not only in KZN, but anywhere in the world. Thank you for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, for the questions. I'm going to come to the group here in 1 second. I have a quick question. How many people in this room are tweeting about your experience today? There is a hashtag. I know, the team at the back is like, us, us, us. Yeah, it's you guys and Lindsay and me, and I think I've seen JP online. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'm just like spamming you. The hashtag for the conference is hashtag TWT Summit 2019. Please tweet. It's part of connecting. Connects you with each other, connects you with the global audience. I see Dr. Makua waving.
Yes.
Do you want to say something, sir?
Yeah, I just want to ask the panel to, as part of their response, to respond to the question of cost. Isaac said something about there's nothing free, and that there are costs which may not be seen at the time when we think something is free. I know that we always say Moodle is free, and Blackboard is not free, and that there are other LMSs that are free. I don't want to debate that, but I would like to hear a more detailed response to that, in as far as when we think something is free, where are we going to run into a situation where we meet unanticipated costs? Because yes, they will be there, unless you just use something maybe to run in your classroom, you know. But if you want to roll it out to the entire institution, I am sure that at some point you will get into that. We do work with institutions internationally which use Moodle, but we are just users, you know, and but we don't know what goes on behind there. And the usage is massive. It covers over 50,000 students who are using that platform. And I am sure that there are intense costs that we may not think or know about. I'm just throwing it to the panel.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, so we had a whole lot of questions here. One was, can you take something online, make it offline? Is there anyone who'd like to address that quickly? Lindsay, JP.
I'll address that question, but before I do that, I just want to say, colleagues, no matter how good Professor Amokhale and Dr. James, how good you can disrupt the system, it will never force or encourage a staff member or a student to use technology. But what will actually encourage staff members and students to use the technology is the accommodating infrastructural environment. You know, if you don't have an environment that will make a person to see a need and to see the value of the paradigm shift that you are moving into, you'll never win. You'll never win. And also, as departments or as universities, we need to begin to set specific goals for e-learning initiatives. And if we do that, at the end of the day, we are supposed to meet those goals. And for us to meet those goals, it will automatically motivate one to move into the same direction. And then coming to the offline and online, yes, we can have an offline system. It is highly possible to have that. Thanks.
What I'm going to say, I'm just cautious that it can come from a place of sounding like privilege. So I want to acknowledge that in the beginning. And I know that infrastructure is a great battle and will continue to remain a great battle. Hopefully not for too long, but it is a reality. And access to data, access to hardware does remain a battle. And I understand, therefore, where that question comes from around, can we make something available offline? To me, if we're looking to the future and we're looking to a vision and the kind of not just paradigm shift, but pedagogy shift that we're wanting to create, if I look at what I can do offline, I can give you something, you can individually give me something back. Right, whether that is content, whether that's text, whether that's an answer, whatever that media happens to be, offline access tends to be at a consumption of information level or a basic demonstration of understanding level. What I think we need to be cognizant of is the fact that when we have online capabilities, we have a far more social, interactive, dynamic, collaborative, collective creativity in that demonstration of learning or in that learning and exploration itself. So there is a different kind of learning that can be enabled when we have access. And so I think it's important that we continue to keep those two ideas in mind. Yes, we need offline access for functionality, and we need offline access to make sure that the learning is accessible. But where we do have online access, we cannot be teaching or using LMSs or using e-learning. I hate that word, but that's what it's known as. We cannot be doing the same thing where there is connectivity, because it enables and it fosters a different kind of learning and a redefinition of tasks that we can give students and the kind of learning really that can happen. So I think it's important that we're cognizant of that. If our practice and our pedagogy does not shift when we do and don't have access to the internet and we are online, then I think we need to question our practice and our pedagogy.
Okay. I'll answer the question on offline mode from a very technological perspective. And coming back from the history that once we ran a program for schools and connectivity was not there. So what used to happen is that whenever we need to transport something to the schools, we took in whatever we want and then created a network close to the school, and the schools could get the content from our server to the school server. However, that technology ceased to be developed because the cost of connectivity came down and the ubiquity of connectivity rose. So the technological advancement in that area seemed to have ceased. However, it's not that they can't be. It's just trying to see how some of the technologies we use in our LMSs could, like we used to do, download the content the student is engaging with, and make a copy, even if it's a 10% copy of whatever the student is having, and the engagement can continue. So technologically, or from a technological perspective, that is possible. I'll respond to the question on creating the environment. And as a response that the environment, in most cases, it's not conducive enough for the lecturers to engage, all the lecturers and students to engage with e-learning. And I sit here and wonder whether there has been enough pressure from the lecturers to define what kind of educational technologies they need. Because I'm also cognizant that there's also a fallacy in that if we build things, people will come. And if we're waiting for that perfect time that we'll have the most conducive environment, it might never come. I think it's one of the American defense secretaries who said you go to war with the army you have, not the army you ought to have. So we must be cautious because if we're sitting down here waiting for an environment or a technology that's conducive for everything that we would dream of, then that might never happen.
Lots of things to reflect on. The offline is actually, I'm a bit of a closet geek, so I'm not really a technologist, but I do love technology. But this is something that excites me a little bit about our system, is that through the app that one has with Moodle, for example, and it's on the phone and also the desktop, is indeed possible to offline not only content, but also even interaction and quizzes, for example. So I've always wondered, I've actually always wanted to have a little class that I can test this to its limits, you know. How far can one go to have, you know, when people are connected, then they do certain things, but when they are at home or wherever they are, on the bus, typically that scenario, then they could also be working, studying, learning, and then when they connect again, things sync up and etc. So actually, with the Moodle infrastructure and app, that is indeed possible. So that's just one reflection on that, and I think that's brilliant. I wanted to go on the crisis idea and say maybe we should see it as challenges, and some others that I thought of that might be worthy to change, to jolt us into action is, I mean, first of all, what we've reflected on this morning is the huge issue and problem of our society, of violence and xenophobia, all these kind of things. Isn't that already enough of a crisis that asks for an educational response? So let's look at how one could address that. Employability has not yet been mentioned, or the possible even worse employability. Isn't that something that all of us, especially teachers, but also all of us that support this academic project, should be sitting upright and saying, but what else can I do? What can keep me up at night? To create the right kind of knowledge, the right kind of programs and learning that my students can be successful and find jobs and get the edge. For example, I love the graduate attributes idea of give them digital fluencies in this possible new ways. So that already asks us to be right in front of our own field so that our students can work on that. So I think we must maybe rather see it as a challenge, a call to arms, to address, I mean, Millennium Development Outcomes, which are the new, I mean, those are quite worthy. So there are many things that we could activate to actually get us thinking about how the hell should we change, that we can make things better for our students, for ourselves, and society. The cost of Moodle, obviously, I guess I'm the only Moodle here, so I probably should know the nuts and the bolts. It is not an easy question. Stellenbosch perspective, I can say that the LMS is so integrated into the whole IT infrastructure that it's difficult to just take that one out and say, yes, there's no license fee, but it's integrated in a certain way. So at our university, our Moodle works brilliantly well because it's behind huge F5 servers that was built for other aspects of the university. It's about a wonderful identity management system that we just can bolt on. It's about brilliant architecture that's nothing to do with the LMS, of how our servers respond, for example. So our Moodle has also been up for 7 years without any, it just purrs on, doesn't matter. I mean, we have thousands of students doing quizzes at the same time. But it's not the LMS, that's not Moodle, that's all the rest. And so we've got, people that look after some parts of the LMS, but others look at all the databases. So the total cost of having the LMS is difficult to pinpoint. I mean, one could ask maybe our colleagues at IT I could ask them to give a kind of a costing for that. The other thing that I just thought of that, and I already mentioned it, the LMS is often just the starting point, because what one next wants is Turnitin or a similar system. What one next wants is a kind of a webinar system. What one next wants is a kind of a recording system. I mean, so it goes on and on and on. And actually those things, Turnitin, Adobe Connect, we use SharePoint, so have Microsoft licenses to pay. We want to integrate Teams now, which I'm very excited about, creating our own little in-house YouTube for the university. So those costs are way higher than the LMS. So you cannot anymore just focus on the LMS as such and you pay a license or not. You must think about how it will integrate into your reality, how it will be robust, and how it will grow into the future. I think those are valuable. And just to say it out loud, personally I think the good LMSs at the moment are pretty much the same in terms of functionality. If you get a good installation, they can more or less do all of the things that you probably want to do with it. It must just be up and running like forever and support, etc., etc.
And then, Saki, you were going to address the issue of cost.
I think I want to latch on what JP said. It's very difficult to really, if you, for instance, go to an external system, a Canvas, your Blackboard, or even Moodle hosted externally. Blackboard also makes available what they call their open LMS, which is Moodle, which they basically host and make available on a different, more like a service. You pay for the service, you don't pay for the software per se. You can say the same for software as a service. You don't pay for the software, you pay for the service of using the software. But I think also higher education, what I picked up is that we are very sneaky when it comes down to the budgetary process. Because someone will come up with a new software that they found somewhere, and it's affordable, and it fits into a departmental budget, and they pay for that, it's not a problem. Then the next thing is they realize that it needs some sort of hardware, and then they either buy a server or they use access capacity. And then when IT needs to do their new budget for new hardware, they just say, oh, by the way, we need to update the hardware. And this is where the failover systems and your load sharing systems and so becomes very, very expensive. So yes, if you've got a lot of systems and you cannot really say, but 10% of this goes to the LMS, 30% to my student information system, and a lot to my creditors and debitors financial systems and so, then it's very difficult to say what is your total cost to company for your LMS per se. But it's very easy when you've got, say, for instance, a service with Blackboard or Sakai or Moodle externally hosted, and that's a single item on a budget. Then people stare at that item and they say, wow. But if it's embedded, if your staff that support that is paid under budgets within IT, within other support structures and so, then people don't realize the sort of hidden embedded cost. And it's easy to sometimes use that as an argument to say, but it's not costing me anything. It's still costing you something because you need to maintain that system. So the only thing is that the staff is paid by HR budget somewhere else. Your infrastructure is paid for by the IT department, and your licensing cost. Oh yes, so by the way, the licensing is free. So now suddenly my LMS is free. So I think that's what I mean as nothing in life is free. You need to look at what is your institutional strategy? What do you want to do? What works for you? And that, you know, I'd like to come back to the one problem that we haven't addressed. What about collaboration?
We're going to have to wind up, sorry. I have our lovely team at the back waving times out to me. And so I do need to wind us up here. Folks, this is not a problem that will ever have been solved on this stage. Okay? So, sorry. As much as you are all wonderful and great and fantastic, the people in this room have to go back to work and make the hard decisions in light of their particular context. And that's a conversation that as a community you are going to need to have. In summary, and I will hold this to a minute, we've heard some of the following things. We've heard people thinking about, do you have the technological infrastructure? Related to that, do you have the manpower related to that? Do you have costs thought about and covered in all the different ways that's possible? We've heard folks here and in the audience reflect on, are we aware of our social context and our environment when we make choices about technology, whether it's an LMS or anything else? We've had people thinking about the digital literacy of both staff and students in relation to this. And we've been talking a little bit, and I don't think we've talked about it enough, to be honest. I think we've gotten stuck on some of the technical issues of LMSs. And I think, Lindsay, you've raised it a little bit. The question of what changes when you are no longer teaching in a face-to-face environment. And I think we've kind of like zipped over that very big canyon, and that's something that I think we could pay more attention to. And then I want to leave everyone with, I think, a really challenging question. The issue of crises came up today, and we've heard two representations of that. One, the idea that a crisis happened in some of our universities around fees must fall, and the other comment that in historically disadvantaged universities, a crisis happens every year. And then a third perspective, which is that basically in South Africa and globally, we live in a crisis, right? And I think what is really challenging is how do we reimagine spaces and ways of learning and teaching in a global context that is simply not okay, that is simply in crisis for vast numbers of people. And a question that looks kind of pragmatic, an LMS question, what should I choose, should be underpinned by, as educational technologists, are we making decisions that make education more accessible to the people around us rather than less so? And I'm going to stop and pause there and use my chairperson's prerogative to have the last word. I would like to say thank you very much to our panel. Can we give our panel a round of applause? And then finally, I would like to say thank you very much to everybody out here. Everybody in the audience has been thinking, and we've had questions and engagements. And I want to say thank you to all of you for your attention and your engagement today. So thank you very much to everyone in the audience. And then I'm going to hand back to our chair for the day.
All right. Thank you, colleagues. It's just a reminder that from here, we're going to have our lunch. Just after lunch, it's going to be our breakaway sessions. So one session is going to be in this room, and then the other one is going to be in the opposite, right, the opposite of this one. So people are going to be chairing those sessions will be Mr. Samkange and Dr. Gumede. So straight from here, we go for our lunch, then we come back. Thank you. The time, I would say as provided in our program. Right now, the time is, what's your time there? The time now is 17 minutes past 1. So we're going to come back at 2:30. At 2:05, okay, thank you. Okay, I've just been corrected. We're coming back at 2:05. Then we continue as per the program. Just know that the two sessions from 12 to 1:30 have been rescheduled for tomorrow. Thank you.